Meanwhile, we have John Fox now joining us via satellite from London. And John, I know you just heard that response from Mary Robinson, and I wanted to know if that's the kind of stance you think we need to hear from all European leaders.
It is. When I saw this particular incident unfold, it's of course very reminiscent of what happened only last year to Chancellor Angela Merkel. She was in a very similar position, met the Dalai Lama, was very heavily criticised for it, and Germany paid a diplomatic price. Gordon Brown has also met the Dalai Lama as well this year. But none of those leaders have shown any kind of solidarity with each other. Each one, in a sense, has taken turn to exploit the bad situation that the others have found themselves in after meeting the Dalai Lama. What I want to see is European leaders coming together and being clear to China that they will meet the Dalai Lama, because, as Mary Robinson said, there are very good reasons for European leaders to do so.
Just let me get some final words from you before we go to break.
The point I'd just make here is that the Dalai Lama's meeting with Nicolas Sarkozy is not about to single-handedly undermine the stability of China. We are talking about an event in Poland which is something which Nicolas Sarkozy feels he has to do. And I'd be quite frank with the Chinese in saying that actually you, the Chinese government, are making an issue out of this, and you are the ones that are rocking the boat here. And so I think whilst those economic points that Sharon brought up are true, I think they're being conflated and turned into a much bigger issue when we look at this Dalai Lama issue. And the point is, of course, the Chinese cancelled a summit where the European side and the Chinese side should have been talking about solutions to the financial crisis.
Okay, well, we'll pick up on that point then after we come back from break. Thanks all so much for joining us again. John, let me begin with this question. China so desperately wants world leaders to reject the Dalai Lama and his calls for greater autonomy for Tibet. Meanwhile, only the contrary has happened, particularly in the case of Western leaders who continue to embrace the Dalai Lama, even increasingly so. So will China eventually have to concede something on this issue and perhaps accept that they won't be able to isolate them as they'd hoped?
I think there's a difference between China conceding something on this issue and accepting that they won't be able to persuade European leaders to share their view. I think as a point of principle, China will never concede anything on this issue, but that would be largely for a domestic audience, China's own people. What I think China has accepted some years ago, and I think goes backwards and forwards on, is whether or not it accepts that it can prevent European leaders from seeing the Dalai Lama. Nicolas Sarkozy has done a good thing by committing himself to see the Dalai Lama this time, but of course it came at the end of a year where he previously had been bullied by the Chinese into cancelling a meeting with the Dalai Lama, and that's a bad sign. And I think European leaders do need to, in a sense, make that distinction with China and not fall into the trap of, in a sense, playing to China's complaints, and make it clear that their view is that they have an obligation to meet the Dalai Lama, and that there's good reasons why China shouldn't have to see that as a complete threat to its stability.
Let me ask you then, what do you think will be the end game here? How long can the international community continue to, in a sense, tiptoe around or diplomatically maneuver around this issue of the Dalai Lama and Tibet?
Unfortunately, until the Dalai Lama dies. After several years in Beijing, I'm afraid I've reached the conclusion pretty clearly that China's strategy is to continue blustering and punishing European and other leaders that meet the Dalai Lama indefinitely, because really they don't have a game plan. The talks with the Dalai Lama's representatives appear to be going absolutely nowhere and appear to be not terribly genuine on China's side. And in fact, we all know that the Chinese leadership has already fiddled with the succession plan for choosing the next Dalai Lama by selecting a rival Panchen Lama. So I'm afraid I've concluded, as I said, that they're just waiting for the Dalai Lama to die, and there really isn't any other end game, and that's a particularly sad strategy, I think, and one which will probably only lead to sort of a spat of conflict when that actually happens.